Hi, it's great to see everybody again. Um, for those that are just tuning in for the first time, why don't we do this? Why don't we just go around and do a quick introduction so that people know about us, our professions, and our services? My name is Jay Henline. I'm the president and owner of Synergy Home Care of Westchester. We're a licensed home care agency, and we're located here in Westchester County, New York. Paul, how about yourself?
Sure. So Paul Doyle from Oasis Senior Advisors. We help families navigate senior care. Our specialty is to find them the right assisted living or memory care community, but we help them make an overall plan. We give them the path, we give them the tools they need to create the path for their loved one.
Okay. Abby?
Hi, thanks, Jay. Abby Udochi, founder and CEO of Concierge Healthcare Consulting. We are aging life care managers, also known as geriatric care managers. And I help bring peace and calm to difficult elder care situations and problems. And I help families coordinate care and coordinate services more easily, more effectively, more efficiently, and with a lot of love.
And Ariel.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ariel Rosenzweig with Eli J. Rosenzweig and Associates. We practice elder law and trust and estates, and we service New York and New Jersey, and some Connecticut as well. And we assist families with planning needs, both in terms of getting everyone on board and also the whole family, and also the financial needs of the parents to make sure that we set them up for long-term financial durability.
Okay, great. Let's dig right into today's topic. And it's one that we're all in our various services and professions uh, come across often, I believe. How do you handle the call or the situation when family members don't agree? All right. And let me get a little more specific just to start it off. Does anybody have a recent scenario where, let's say, the older adult does need services, your services, the adult children all agree and know that older loved one needs the services, but for whatever the reason, the older adult is in denial, doesn't think they need it, or doesn't see value in it. Who usually from the family is making that initial call to you, and how are you handling that situation? Anybody? A recent one?
Sure. I talked to a family yesterday, um, and it's even more complicated. It's a blended family. So you have mom and or dad and stepmom, and the generation below them don't see this, don't see the picture the same way. And mom has advanced dementia. Dad's been the caregiver, but dad's now hospitalized. He wants to stay at home, but now he realizes he's so compromised, he's afraid of going back into the home and having that burden. Still, he doesn't know what he wants. So you have all these different people, just opinions. And what we've offered them, or what I gave them yesterday, was sort of the broad lay of the land. I'm not saying this is what you want, but what kind of care. We start with what kind of care is needed. And then we discuss the options, the different ways to skin the cat, as it were. And there were a bunch. And so home care comes up. So what does home care look like? So give them enough background information on it that somebody can become an advocate for that, or they can embrace that, the disparate opinions in the family. We talked about bringing in a geriatric care manager and this idea of a, general contractor for all care issues. And and the real key piece here was recognizing who the decision maker is. And in this array of individuals, it's still dad, because he has capacity and he's taking care of his wife, and as doting and loving as the kids are, the final say is him. So what does he need to make his decision? Not what his decision is, but what can we bring him? And the simplest way probably would have been, in the short term, for the family to hire a geriatric care manager to get the conversation started.
Yeah, we come across that situation often. It's a similar scenario. Uh, we had one not too long ago where actually, funny enough, the adult child and the wife were in agreement, and it was the husband who really needed, from a physical standpoint, he was having some physical issues. He needed the support. He was The wife wanted to go actually to a community, but the husband was adamant about not going. So the adult daughter had called and was at wit's end because she was exhausted, and she was the one that was going over all the time and providing the extra support. And it was so interesting because even though the dad knew what was happening and that all that his daughter was doing for him, and it was exhausting her, and it was really making her life more complicated in many ways, I think there was a fear factor for him. It was he and his wife had been doing it together for so long, and now suddenly he was the reason why this was gonna have to change. And it was a really difficult thing for him to, if you will, swallow. And so what we did was, for the way we go about it, is I want to hear the conversation. So the adult daughter and I had a very, very long conversation. And similar to what you're saying, Paul, I got a lot of information. I wanted to understand who are the different people in the family. What's their role? Are there any initial objections? What are those objections? Do they seem like they're objections that can possibly be brainstormed through? And it was clear that in similar to your situation, that the dad was the decision maker and was really the one in control. So ultimately, what I want to do is I want to be able to go and meet with the family if they're willing to. And that's important because if they're not willing to, then it tells me that this is not the right moment for that family. That no matter what I say or do, it probably is not, our services are not going to be brought on because somebody is putting up that ultimate roadblock. And so I ended up going over, meeting with them. We talked about it. I was able to talk to the dad, hear what his reasons were for not wanting to move, because I was going to actually, Paul, I was going to be pulling you right in because I thought for sure that they would be agreeing to go to a community, but he didn't want to move to the community yet because he wanted to stay at home. So the compromise, after we talked for a while in their home, I think he got more comfortable with the idea of, okay, this is what having an outside person come in looks like. And we were able to develop a compromise where once or twice a week, there would be somebody that would come in to be there for the wife as well, so that she could start going out more because of his physical compromises. He wasn't able to take her out as much. And so that was the small little win to get them a little extra support, to get the wife more in line with what she wanted in terms of freedom, going out, socialization, but not overwhelming the husband with he is getting all of this attention and care at home, which he didn't want. It's really, it's always each family is going to be very unique. And that's how we kind of develop that situation.
And
Yeah.
Jay, I'm sorry. Happy, go ahead.
No, please.
Okay, I wanted to follow up on one point you made about the fear factor. And often that is the primary reason why it's not the parents who call us usually to do planning, it's the children. Because the parents are more afraid. Children are also afraid, but the parents are obviously the one that everyone's talking about. So there's a lot of fear, and there's a lot of fear of the unknown in terms of cost, whether it's cost of legal services or cost of what care might cost and where they might live, and all these things that Jay and Paul, you both spoke about. But there's also the fear, everyone's heard of some of the planning that we do relates to Medicaid. And then there's this fear that people have, oh my gosh, Medicaid is for poor people. I'm not poor. They kind of have that vision of like a single mom in a shelter, and they don't realize, wait a second, but I also can't afford a $20,000 a month care need. And they may be in denial about, as Jay noted, whether there is that care need. Or so often what happens is the first conversation we have is with the children. Hopefully, if we're lucky, the consultation that we have includes the parents, but it's a slow moving process to bring them on board. Sometimes it's just laying the groundwork, that we're not applying for getting any services right now. But it's a kind of like uh, a process where you start with setting the groundwork. Maybe a few months down the road, maybe down the road much further, we actually put the care in place. But at least they know that they have a plan in place where we'll hopefully, in the meantime, get the services in place that they need, whether it's to get better senior housing or a geriatric care manager involved or home care while they're going through this process where it's more limited, and to let them know, by the way, you're still in control. You get to decide when we're speaking to the parent, the older person, you get to decide ultimately what care needs you have, and what care needs you're willing to take in. But it's a lot easier for them ultimately to make the jump when they know, okay, I'm not going to have to eviscerate every penny I ever earned to get the care that I might need. Becomes a lot easier for them, but it's often a slow moving process.
No.
Yeah, I agree. When families don't agree, things can be slow moving. One of the things that I was thinking when Jay talked about his family, first of all, Jay, I think you did a fantastic job helping them get services in there. And I don't think it is a small change. I think it is a huge change, especially for someone who is starting from no, right? And had his reasons why it's a no. And so one of the things I think is that no is not no forever. No is no for now. So I think professionals like us can help lay groundwork as adult children will help lay groundwork. And eventually, needs will become such that it's obvious that a change is required. And I find that with clients who are afraid, for the reasons that Paul and Jay laid out and Ariel laid out, people are afraid. People don't want to give up control. People don't want to give up agency. People don't want to be a burden to their family. People don't want to outlive their money. And people don't want to be seen as incompetent as we age. So all of those are really good reasons for someone who's aging and needs help to say, I don't want any more help. I don't need anyone in here in my business telling me what to do and telling me that I need to change my mind.
Yeah.
But having professional advice sometimes can help persuade, and can help bring new perspective as to why. Sometimes I find with clients that parents don't necessarily want to take the advice of their adult children because they're the parent. They're the one that's used to being in charge. And maybe the kid just thinks I'm a burden and wants to throw me away and wants me to just hire somebody so they don't have to deal with me. I hear that a lot. But that many times is not the case. Many times the adult kids feel like I'm at my wit's end. I don't know what else to do to help mom or help dad. And I no longer have the expertise or the time or the health or the capability to do the things now that are required. I could do the things prior to now, but I can't do the things that are required for mom and dad right now. So getting a different perspective as to how to kind of present the matter and present the solutions can be a really good idea. I have this client right now. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but I'm going to meet with this client who's 86 and his two elderly sisters tomorrow. Now they're both younger than he is, but they have his power. They hold power of attorney agent. They hold healthcare proxy agent for him. And they grew up bickering. They're like the Bickersons, these three. And so he doesn't think they know what they're doing, because he's the eldest, and he feels like they are always bullying him and telling him what to do. That's not my perspective. But there's a particular issue that they need to deal with. So he called me to say, Abby, my sisters are coming here tomorrow, and I don't want to see them because it's just gonna become a shouting and screaming match, and I don't want them here. Tell them not to come. So, so I said, well, what would it be like maybe if I was there as well? Maybe we have a pre-meeting and talk about the things that are on your mind, and we figure out how to present them to your sisters. And then I'll also talk with them and find out what it is they need to say to you. And I can be there to help kind of mediate the conversation. And maybe everyone will be less likely to yell and to scream. And he said, okay, you should come and do that. So I'm going to do that tomorrow and see how it goes. But it really is about understanding what his concerns and obstacles are, understanding what their legitimate concerns are when it comes to them helping with his care, so we can find a place where everyone can feel like they've been heard and some change gets made.
Yeah, I think that's great insight, Abby. It's that
Amazing.
and you break it down because as a professional, you've assessed it and you have an opinion about what the end result would be. But that's not what you present at the beginning. You just get momentum going. You mentioned the obstacles. You just get obstacles out of the way and keep people moving. So
Right,
sometimes they have a big decision ahead of them, but if you can give them a little decision that they can own and they can embrace and they can tackle and have some success with, then you can move on to the next one. I
right,
think that, in all businesses, our greatest skill set is, we have this experience, which is very valuable, but that's an asset. The skill set is in active listening and then directing conversations that way or just moving things forward.
right.
Yeah, and to add to that, Paul, I think, and it's why I enjoy these conversations so much because I always learn something from our conversations. Um, and I think it's the willingness to listen, be that professional, that experienced professional, but giving people a place where they can be heard. And sometimes it takes multiple meetings. And there are a lot of people out there that aren't willing to put that time and effort in. So we just end up being resources for families. And we go in and sit with them and hear what they have to say. And sometimes, as you said, it's a small little chip off the iceberg,
Yeah,
but it's those little chips and the willingness to sit with them and hear them and make sure everyone knows that you're listening
yeah,
and you're not telling them what to do
yeah,
that they remember and they
yeah.
come back to.
And it can make a difference, in their lives. One of the things I think we all bring to the table is having done a lot with multiple families over a long period of time. So we've seen many things, and we understand that while every family is unique, not every situation is unique. So there are strategies that we may know work because we've seen them work, and we can introduce them to a difficult time, and perhaps help someone come to a solution based on what we've seen has been helpful.
Yeah, and it's funny you're saying that because how many times have you been in a one of those, as you said, you go in tomorrow, you don't know. It could just be everyone's yelling at everyone else. And
Oh, I hope
you,
not.
right, but
We'll
how
see.
many
Yeah.
times have you been in that scenario? And as you've left it, one of the adult children or the older parent, whoever it is, comes up to you and says, I'm so sorry you had to experience that.
Yeah.
And you had to go through our family drama.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you say, that's okay. That's exactly what I expected. And that was really good. And they're just blown away by the fact that you didn't run out the door
Right.
the minute, because as Paul said, as the professional, that that was actually a really good, it wasn't an easy meeting, but it was actually a really good meeting because it got everybody at least moving one step closer,
Yeah.
right?
You
Yeah.
know what?
Ariel,
Yeah.
you must always be initially having to deal with when people come to you for, right, the advanced directives. There's a legal world. But I would imagine you have to help families separate the emotional component from the legal component. Because ultimately, you need to strip out the emotional component first and get through that before you can get to the legal component, which is why they're coming to you. How do you do that?
So I think it's an important point. I also think that and the the family members, firstly, to the discussion we were just having about having them have a blowout at a meeting, they think you've never seen it before. And
Right.
especially as a lawyer, I could say, like, they're always, I'm sure you've never seen a case like this. I'm like, let me just tell you, I have. And that's comforting to them because they realize, wait a second, we're not abnormal. We are not like some wacky family. We are a typical family. And typical families have differences of opinion on how to approach elder care and cost and all those different things that people grapple with. So that to show them that it's not unusual. But to get to your point, Jay, about separating the emotion from the legal work, it is, you know, people often they'll come in and they'll, when it comes to estate planning in particular, they'll come in and they'll say, well, I have two daughters and I love them both and I want them both to be my power of attorney. And then we talk about it, and if that's what they want to do, that's what they want to do. And then we start talking, and then they make it clear that, well, one of the children is really struggling financially, and they really don't manage money well, and they have a drug addict husband, and who, who's spending all their, and we talk about it, and there's the emotion of, well, I want everyone to be treated exactly the same. And sometimes it works out that way. And sometimes it's just not a good idea, and they have to kind of see through it from someone who's seen it on the other side. And this goes for elder care as well, whether it's a healthcare proxy or the kind of care that someone needs. The emotion of I'm never sending mom to a nursing home. Now, very often, as we all know, and we try to help clients do, is we try to help people stay away from an institutional setting like that when we can. But that emotion of, well, I'm never going to need that. We don't know what you're going to need. I don't know. They don't know. And if someone has a massive stroke, God forbid, and needs a nursing setting because they're on a ventilator, and we need to make sure we're prepared so that if that happens, you're not spending $45,000 a month for the care. So sometimes there's the emotion of absolutely not. And we all, one of the things that's really wonderful about this group of professionals is that we all try to help people get the best quality of life. And often that isn't in a nursing home setting, but sometimes it is. And there's often that, whether it's live-in care and people don't want anyone in their house all the time, or whether it's I don't like having lunch with old people, even though they're 97 and they don't want to go to a senior living facility because that means they're going to have lunch with old people all the time, which is a fear and how they view themselves. It all comes down to kind of like setting it up so that they can ultimately make their own informed decision. And an informed decision where there is obviously the emotional component because the kind of work that we do, which is why we do it, is totally imbued with lots of emotion. It's what makes it fulfilling and what helps people bring them to a place where they're complete. But at the end of the day, we need to set up a plan, and you do have to absolutely try to break them up a little bit as best that you can so that people could see, wait a second, you're on my team. You're not trying to throw me in a nursing home or getting me AIDS all day long or throwing me into a senior living facility or bothering me about my finances when I never discuss my finances with anybody. You see this happen as much as it happens with children, when people do not have the blessing of children and they're reliant on nephews and nieces and things like that. It becomes even more strife with this because they love them. They want these people involved, but at the end of the day, they've never been involved before
Mhm.
at all.
Yes.
And it becomes a lot more difficult, but the goal is to try to streamline it as best as we can.
I think Ariel, when you get those absolutes, like I don't want, yeah, I promised my mom I would never put her in a nursing home. I don't want to have somebody staying in the house alongside us. Any of those no's. I, I actually embrace those, almost like those situations, or come to like those situations because they're easier for me. Again, with the active listening, you just take that. That's a negative. It's not a plan though. So I can compartmentalize that and say, okay, not going to do that. Let's work out a plan that keeps us away from that. And what will happen is you start pushing those pieces together. It tends to ameliorate that that absolute. It's not quite as firm. When they start to see the balance of I've laid down this dictate and we're not going to do this. And then you realize what the alternatives are. But you can never put that aside because that's where their fear, you were talking about fear before, that's their fear. They just laid it out and gave it
Yep.
to you. That's as honest as somebody can give to you. This is the one thing left in my life I don't want happening. So you have to respect that. And you
Yeah.
have to respect it.
And you start giving them through your scenario, you start giving them the yeses. You start giving them the control. You give them the power to make those decisions. And suddenly that one no is outweighed by 10 yeses that
Right.
they have been in complete control over. And they're not even thinking about the no anymore. And the no often is part of that plan in some way,
Right.
Yeah.
right? It's been acknowledged.
Yeah.
I mean, Ariel, as you're going through all that, I think to myself, you know, when I see those really emotional family situations, I push even harder to make sure that there are advanced directives in place because ultimately I know that, and I've seen too many times that if they're that emotional at the very beginning of the process, there had better be some clarity, legal clarity into who makes the decisions and who has the right to make the decisions and what decisions, because that emotion's going to resurface later when it becomes even more critical.
Absolutely. I think when there's, especially in the spousal situation, spouses assume, very smart, educated people, they assume that, well, this is in sickness and in health, um, means that I have authority over my husband. I have authority over my wife. I don't need documents. Or they don't realize that that's not true because they haven't seen, they might have been married blissfully for 75 years, but there's people who have not. And not everyone wants their spouse so as their power of attorney. So it isn't just a given or a healthcare proxy. And there's this assumption, and it often prevents them from taking the next step and making sure they have proper documents in place because they just assume. And then when I sit down with them and I say, wait a second, you do realize that what you have right now is not sufficient because if your wife ever becomes incapacitated, you have no authority. He's like, what are you talking about? She's my wife. And to get over that hump that yes, you are the husband of 70 years or 60 years, and you love her very much, and but you don't have the automatic authority, and you need to make sure you have documentation in place because if you don't, you're going to end up trying to prove your devotion uh, in the courtroom, and then there might be a child who doesn't agree with you, and then you have a family mess, where all of this could have been set up a lot better a long time ago. The faster people put this in place, the better. If someone comes to me and says, what is the most important thing for me to do? And they're 25 years old or 95 years old, power of attorney and healthcare proxy. No matter what. There's a lot of other things that need to be done, but if you're going to pick one thing to make sure that they're robust, that they're comprehensive, to make sure that you're naming the right people, not just your children in the order of age, which is often the way people kind of get around favoritism. They're like, oh, I'll just name my oldest, and then my second oldest, and then my third oldest. It's not always so clear, and it's definitely not so clear when people don't have children, and they're appointing friends, they're appointing children those friends that they're appointing, are those friends 15 years older than they are? Um, and maybe they're not going to be in the position to make these decisions. So all these things are really, it's rife with emotion, and you really see it, particularly with people who do not have children, where, that kind of comes back at them, when they're older and they realize, wait a second, I don't have anyone to take care of me, and it's very difficult. And there's a lot of emotion involved, and then you could see it on their face. But it's really important to make sure that it's ultimately your decisions that are the ones that are implemented, and nobody else's, and no court imposed decisions. Really important.
One of the things that I've been running into more and more frequently, especially when the parent is just really fighting assistance or support, I should say. They're fighting support from their older kids. The healthcare proxy and power of attorney may be in place, but they want to get out of rehab earlier than they should, or they don't want care at home, or they really don't think it's time to move from independent living to assisted living, even though the evidence is there. It's in the house physically, you can see it cognitively. They were insisting on doing their taxes, even though it's clear they're not capable. And these are real scenarios from clients that I'm naming. And the kids feel powerless because they don't really know how to use the power of attorney or healthcare proxy. They're not really sure what they can do to intervene. So I find sometimes, Ariel, maybe you can provide a little clarity. What can families do when they have these tools and the parent is really not wanting to accept additional support, but it would be, I don't want to say negligent, but it might be irresponsible not to try and intervene from a financial standpoint or a safety standpoint? What can one do? And
So
that creates friction and argument. What can one do?
never argument. No, but yeah, that is a very common problem where you name your child or whoever as your power of attorney, as your agent, and when push comes to shove, you fight with them about the decisions that they're making. Now, sometimes, and obviously this power of attorney has to be given when you're in the right state of mind.
Right.
That's a topic
Assuming that it is.
assuming that it is.
Yeah.
Uh, and we really need to make sure that, first of all, they understand when we do a power of attorney initially, when we execute the documents, that they understand the authority that they're giving. It's also very, very, very important that the agents are people that, to the extent that the parent can be involved in decision making, that they are. Meaning you pass everything by the parent as best as you can. Now, if there is a point where a parent says no, now, then the question is, they can override the power of attorney.
Right.
They
Do they
can
still have
revoke the
capacity?
power of attorney.
Right.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I think that comes down to it.
Sometimes that ends up in guardianship court, where the parent, there's a question of competency, it's not clear, and the child then goes to enforce that power of attorney by way of guardianship. And sometimes that is required to happen. That is the only way you can absolutely control the parents. But I also find that sometimes children, if they're named as the power of attorney, sometimes too much information is a bad thing. And if the parent named you as the agent, as the power of attorney, and the parent is a difficult kind of person, but they're not really monitoring their finances and they really can't handle it, and they need you, you don't have to share the play-by-play with the parent every single time. Oh, I paid this bill, I paid that bill. No, they appointed you as the power of attorney, as the agent, and you have a right to do that. Sometimes the bickering occurs because obviously you have to act in their best interest. That's the job of an agent. But that doesn't mean in their best interest, sometimes means you don't share the play-by-play because they're not really understanding it the way they should be understanding it, which creates the fight. So sometimes too, you want to do what you need to do without involving your parents in every single conversation. That doesn't always work. It depends how competent the parent is, but sometimes that is an important tool that a lot of children are very uncomfortable doing because they haven't been taking care of their parents' bills. The last time anyone took care of bills was when the parents took care of theirs. So it's very, very difficult, but sometimes that's what it takes.
So
Yeah.
for us, it tends to be more, we use it with the adult children. We have scenarios where it's as typical families, right? There's one adult child that tends to be the one that's most actively involved. And we'll have scenarios where out of nowhere, an adult children comes back into the picture. I had a situation not too long ago. Parent had cognitive impairment. There was a advanced cognitive impairment, but and everything was fine for years. And then suddenly another child that had been out of the picture, periodically coming and going, but not really actively involved in any decision whatsoever, decided they didn't like the way the other child was making the decisions and was starting to go into denial about what the parent needed and really inappropriate all around. But it was very clear for us. The legal documents made it very clear for us as to who we were talking to. And we always will handle all of the family members with professionalism and respect. But that was not something that there was going to be any argument about. We knew exactly who the maker was and who had the power to make those decisions for the safety and benefit of the adult parent. And that made our lives so much easier because, I remember a scenario where out of nowhere, one of our clients was in the hospital. And then all of a sudden, and this is why this goes back actually what we were talking about at the very beginning, and that is conversations and getting all of the information. I'll often be talking to a family and I'll say, tell me about your kids. And they'll tell me about, oh, but don't even worry about that one. They're not involved. They've been estranged for years. Okay. Actually, I'd like to know a little more about that one because those typically are the ones that sometimes can come in and make the other adult children's lives very difficult.
Yeah.
So, Paul,
This
how
is a
about,
difficult topic,
yeah,
and
it is. And
there's
it's an
no
interesting
one
one.
answer. There's no one answer for
One
families,
last
but
scenario I
getting in
was
there
thinking
and
about.
trying is really important.
Right. And one last scenario I was thinking about, Paul, was for you when you have the children that don't agree as to what mom and dad should do, and it influences the parent, but the parents, let's say, want to go to a community, but there's bickering amongst the adult children. How do you try to smooth that over, knowing that the parents would like to do this, but they're hesitating because of maybe dissent from one of their children?
Well, I mean, obviously that's a really broad question. It depends on the exact circumstance, but I tell you one consistency is what we said before is what is the stumbling block? What is that absolute? And let's get people talking because most of the time the problem is that people haven't had these conversations. It's probably the most intense conversation and one of the biggest decisions you make in your life. And you're the least prepared for it because you wait until you've been dropped into a crisis to discuss it. And you have no context, and you haven't been talking about it. And I was struck when we talked about the power of attorney. The piece that I don't like is when people do say, well, I'm the power of attorney, with the emphasis on power. And to me, that when we're relying on paper within a family, that's a real, that means we're down a bad path. We need to repair the human side. We need to repair the relationships. These may be people who've been estranged for a while, and it may be irreparable, but you have to do your best to get those people what they need. You start with the person who needs the care. You go to the next person who's delivering that care, and then their support structure, and make sure everybody's included because then that's a cohesive team, as cohesive as it can be. right? We're not going to get perfection all of the time.
It's an emotional situation, right? And
Absolutely.
as you say that, I was just thinking about a scenario where it was two brothers. The dad needed some care. Dad wanted the care, but he was hesitant, and because one of the adult brothers didn't think he needed it, was against it. And it wasn't until, and so I went through a lot of the steps that we've all just discussed here, right? I got the information. I went to visit them. We sat, we chatted, but it wasn't until, and the dissenting child is the one that called me, that dad almost fell overnight. And that's when the son called me and said, "You're not gonna believe this, but dad almost dad almost had a really bad fall last night. We got lucky, he was okay, no problems. But it made me realize I was I was trying to hold on to his independence for him and making him he was even more at risk because I was fighting my own little battle. So thanks for coming over to see us and sitting with us and being there so I could talk about why I didn't think he needed it, but can we get together again because we want somebody to start coming in,
Mhm.
right?" And it was that breaking of that ice, letting that person get it out as to what the no was. And then sometimes it just takes a little time. And unfortunately, sometimes there is an event. Fortunately, this was a very minor one that got everyone on the same page. We could talk, I'm sure we could talk about this for another couple hours, and we could really drill down into even more specific situations that we each have experienced in all of our years of serving the local community. But I think we covered some nice broad strokes for families. I hope this was helpful for families, and making them understand that you're really not alone. But big step is bring in a professional and start the conversation and figure out what the no's are so that you can start working through an alternative plan. Mm. With that, thank you for coming and being part of this.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jay.
Thanks,
Thank you,
guys.
Abby. Thank you,
Thanks, Jay.
Paul.
See you next time.
Take care.